So whenever you're ready, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Kristen Jackson, and I'm a 6th grade math teacher at Hunters Point Community Middle School in Long Island City, Queens, in New York City.
The first one. First question is, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
So before the lesson, this unit is about variables and patterns, and connecting to the Common Core. Students should be able to look at patterns and make connections, and specifically write algebraic expressions and equations from those patterns. And so we recently spoke about number properties, and today's lesson, and before that we spoke about making patterns and looking for connections and writing algebraic expressions and talking about terms and collecting like terms. And today was, I noticed that they were having some trouble with the distributive property and collecting like terms. So today's lesson incorporated the properties, the writing expressions, and simplifying expressions, all in an effort to identify equivalence between expressions.
Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
Okay, I'm going to look at my notes.
Okay, go for it. I'm recording. Do you want me to read the question again?
That'd be great.
Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
So this lesson brought in a lot of concepts from the 6th grade expressions and equations cluster from the Common Core. So 6EE, A1, 2B, all of those standards. A lot of those standards were touched on in today's lesson. So one of them is to evaluate expressions. Pick a term, plug it in. They were using words like phrases like plug and chug, and I know there was a lot.
You can keep continuing.
Okay.
If you want to look at your notes, you can pick it up wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Do you feel like you answered, or do you want to keep going?
No, I mean there's so many. I just can't remember
Right.
what all of they are. So the students were evaluating expressions. They were allowed to use any strategy that they could remember to tell whether the expressions were equivalent. So a lot of them, from creating their expression, they looked at the table and then they used the table. They picked a term, they picked a number, plugged it in to see if they would get a number from the table, and that's one of the standards under the cluster EE. And writing equations. There were some students that started just with an expression, 2s or 2n plus 2. But then another student was really curious as to why the expression wasn't turned into an equation. T equals 2n or 2s plus 2. And so that's in the cluster 2, writing expressions, writing equations, and then understanding why how those two are related and how they're different.
Good. Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified?
I don't even have those with me. I feel like I printed them out, but
Do you want to just move on to the next one, the shifts?
if you give me like 3 minutes, I can find them.
Yeah, it's up to you.
I know exactly what the.
Okay, so that's that. And so which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified?
I think that students were really able to make connections across the entire cluster and across the expression and equations cluster. And my questioning, I think, helped guide them into making connections without being too leading. I also think that in terms of planning, I really tried to incorporate as many, without going overboard, of the standards within that cluster as possible.
Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Okay, got it. So I think that one of the shifts are connecting conceptual understanding to fluency. And so when we learned about writing expressions and recognizing patterns and writing expressions to match those patterns, we had scenarios, and we were crafting understanding, and now they just had 9 problems to practice. So at some point in time, they got some understanding around it, and today we just did a lot of practice, or what I thought was a good amount of practice for them, just simplifying expressions.
How did you teach the content of this lesson prior to CCSS? What's the same and what's different?
So this is my first year teaching 6th grade. So how did we teach it? How did I teach it before? When I taught 8th grade, it was similar. We talked about what it meant to notice a pattern and create an expression based on that pattern. And it's interesting that I'm teaching 6th grade and we're doing the same things that we did in 8th grade, with the patterns just being more simple. The patterns just being easier to make. So things seem like they're being shifted down from higher grades to lower grades.
How did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson?
I think they did. I think there were various levels of understanding, as evidenced by a lot of them. They were having conversations where some understood it, understood why n squared was different than 2n, and she was able to plug in a number and show her classmate that they were different. She really had a great grasp on it, and the other one needed some coaching to understand that. So I think in the end, their understanding, they understood. I didn't have a chance to give the exit slip. We ran a little bit over. I'll really have a chance to tell when I give them the exit slip tomorrow.
Explain how you differentiated in the lesson. Did all students have the opportunity to work on grade level content?
So the content presented was on grade level. The differentiation that I offered was offering different manipulatives. They did have the chance to use toothpicks to build the structure if the students were more inclined to tactile methods of learning. I gave them graph paper, and a lot of students wanted to go right to the table, and so I could see that they had, there were just multiple points of entry. So the student could have created a table first. So they could have gone from the model to the table. They could have gone from the model to the expression or to the description. So the differentiation was there. I differentiated the product, or I allowed them to differentiate the product.
Which behaviors from Correction 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson?
I'm not sure I know what Correction 3 is.
Okay. Let's see here. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked particularly well and what might you do differently?
What worked well? I think that I gave the students enough problems. They had 9 problems to simplify. Next time, I think that I want to give the students that really got a grasp and got it right away some more challenging problems, maybe even embedded in an equation that they had to solve, or a tougher expression, maybe making or showing them some expressions from a Regents test. I mean, there are some Regents questions that I think that they could definitely answer, and maybe giving them a harder pattern next time, something that required a bit more exploring, and having them do the same thing with a harder pattern.
Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
They're pretty typical. Whenever kids get videotaped, they're always well behaved. Not always, but they tend to behave. So that was nice. But it was very typical. They like to get out of their seat to talk to their friends about the problem. They like to compete. They like to prove that they're right. They like to come to the board. They appreciate explanations from their peers, and appreciate explanations from me when they don't trust their peers. So they were pretty typical today.
That's it.
Great.
You're done. Thank you.
Thank you.